Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's October, which means it's Dysautonomia Awareness Month. And POTS is a form of dysautonomia. Awareness Month is really cool to me. In the States, there are tons of events to raise awareness. And hopefully next year, I do dream of planning a cool event here in Edmonton, hopefully. To raise awareness, because there isn't any kind of event here in Canada that I know of, at least. So for this awareness video, I want to raise awareness of depression with a chronic illness. I didn't know what to think, how to react. I didn't know how to even ask for help or even how to ask for advice on how to process or deal with things. I was young, I didn't know. So I would find myself in a dark bedroom for days at a time. I was afraid to leave the house, and at times I just didn't want to leave the house. There was something wrong with me and I had an illness, and that was weird to me. That made me feel like I was strange. Which in turn, made me kind of dig myself into a hole. I didn't feel comfortable with who I was now that I had an illness. I found friends leaving. I had friends who didn't stop to ask if I was okay. I'd stop showing up at school. I'm actually a high school dropout. My illness did prevent me from being able to finish high school, which again is a huge thing. I wasn't able to finish school like everyone else is able to do and should do, and that really made me feel bad about myself too. There's all these factors that were changing in my life, and I didn't see any of them as positive. It was really hard. I was 15 years old, and for my life to be totally turned upside down, and to be told that there's something wrong with me, and at the time they couldn't tell me what it was. And at the time they were telling me that it was in my head. This was my fault. And to sit there alone and think about that, it really made my mind think hard, and I didn't know how to step forward. Again, I didn't want to leave the house. People stopped talking to me, so I just stopped bothering to make the effort to talk to other people. When people asked how I was doing, I didn't know how to answer that, because inside I was terrified of what was happening. When you have doctors that can't tell you what's wrong, it's really scary. There's a lot of fears that come with knowing in your heart that something's wrong, but doctors continually telling you that they can't tell you what's wrong. And depression was something I probably dealt with for at least the first year of becoming unwell. And when I did get a diagnosis, that did help, knowing that, okay, finally I can just kind of relieve my mind from the stress of finding out what is wrong. So when I found out what was wrong, it was okay. This is what it is. Okay, what am I going to do about that? So there came to a point where I just stood in the mirror and looked at myself. I had stopped wanting to get up and get dressed in the morning. I would be in pajamas all day for weeks. That wasn't cool. That sucked. I stopped wanting to leave the house and go out because I had an illness, and this was terrible to me. And I didn't want people to have to approach me, and I didn't want to tell people that I had an illness. This was like, I didn't want to have to explain to people why I haven't been out and about and why no one has seen me or heard from me. I was absolutely terrified of having to explain what was wrong, even though I was still really new to this news. And, it did come to that point where I just stood there and looked at myself in the mirror and said, this has got to change. I can't let this be who I am. I can't let this illness totally take control of my everyday life. And I used the anger and the sadness I had, and I put it towards wanting to prove my illness wrong. So all that anger I have about all the things that I've gone through, I still, to this day, put it towards my illness. Like, okay, you can keep throwing things at me, but I'm going to fight back. You can't win. This illness just cannot win. And I slowly would wake up and I'd use a lot of energy and I'd get dressed. So for a while there, I would just wake up and get dressed, and that's what I would do for the day. But I would get ready. So that was definitely a huge step. And then once that was getting easier, I don't know where I read it. No one really told me. But there's things called mantras. So something that you say to yourself over and over again to get you going, to get you through things. So I thought of a mantra. 1 second at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 day at a time. And I would say this over and over in my head. And I eventually started going out more. So if I was out and, there's all these people my age around me, and it's making me really anxious because, that's how my life used to be, and, I'm definitely not like that now. How am I going to talk to them because there's something wrong with me? So I would just think in my head, okay, 1 second at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 day at a time. And I eventually learned to get through all these stresses and these anxious moments when I was out and through the day. And it took me a while, but I stopped being anxious to leave the house. I stopped being anxious while outside and doing things. The mall wasn't an intimidating thing anymore because I was terrified to go to the mall. Where all these people were, and I don't know, I guess it's kind of odd in a way that I thought people could see that I had an illness. I do have an invisible illness, but some part of me in my head thought that, oh my gosh, they're going to look at me and just know that I'm weird and have an illness. But I eventually got over that too. You have to give yourself credit that life is hard. It's not easy.